Okay, Gabaldik. Good morning to everybody. V'siyata d'shmaya, we're jumping into Torah Vav as we continue our limud of Rebbe Nachman's Likutei Moharan. And we find ourselves at Ois Dalid. Torah Vav Ois Dalid. We've been speaking about tshuva, we've been speaking about kavod, and how a person's able to get out of what the Rebbe calls Kehal Yedidim and to access a state, or get out of rather what the Rebbe calls Kehal Malachim, and to access a state called Kehal Yedidim. And the Rebbe explains that the way to do that is through tshuva. That tshuva is connected to the concept of ekya, which is anazaman l'mehevi, a person who's ready to change, who's ready to become, who's ready to have havaya ba'olam, right? Who's ready to have a real existence. And along that process of ekya, of anazaman l'mehevi, there's a bechina of keser, of katarli, which is a bechina of waiting, because hamtein, because a person has to go slow, and a person can't rush the process. And a person has to have the wherewithal to be able to overcome the challenges that they're going to face along the way. And, for example, if a person is met with an experience of shame or embarrassment, they have to know how to remain silent. That's also part of hamtein. That itself is part of the hamtein, the tshuva process. And then keser is chaf, and chaf is kavod. And all the while that a person is not yet in a state of ekya, that's a bechina of ekya b'astaras panim mimenu, that's gematria adam. Person is in a state of grappling with the Yetzer Hara in a very serious way, or even identifying with the nefesh of the Yetzer Hara. And a person is able to break out of that by being zaveach the Yetzer Hara, zaveach toida yichabdani, which is a reference to v'libi chalal b'kirbi, to David HaMelech emptying out that left ventricle of the heart, and that leads to kavod. Zaveach toida, person shechs the Yetzer Hara yichabdanani. How does a person get to v'libi chalal b'kirbi? The pasuk that says daim la'Hashem v'hischayil eloi. V'hischayil eloi is a bechina of chalo. That's v'libi chalal b'kirbi, because the Gemara in Gittin says v'hu yapalecha chalalim chalalim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will prepare corpses, which in this context means that Hashem will help the person shecht the Yetzer Hara, that will become a corpse, and the heart will become emptied out of the dam, which was the Astaras B'nei Ekya gematria dam. And then the person will be in a state of daim, turning dam into daim. When a person hears themselves being embarrassed, which is an assault and an affront on their own experience of k'fayid malachim, and instead of attacking and instead of refusing to listen and hearing a constructive criticism, whether it's coming from outside or whether it's coming from inside, and adapting to recognize that Adarabba, I'm not here to defend my own position. I'm here to, in the best way, become a channel to allow HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light to come through to the world. And if this is a way that I can improve, so then Adarabba, because a person doesn't have his own kavod. And so Yishma b'zyoinai, idam v'yishtaik, when a person hears themselves being embarrassed, they just respond with silence. Daim la'Hashem v'hischayil, that's dam to daim. Then the Rebbe told us yesterday that a person has to constantly be walking the paths of tshuva. Either, number one, the first kind of tshuva is when a person has an insincere tshuva, and that's a bechina of bisvas of kibduni, even though there's an aspect of kavod from the standpoint of tshuva, and he's honoring Hashem, but it's only minasafa v'lechutz, it's lip service. That's really where that English terminology comes from. This pasuk, bisvas of kibduni, it's lip service, right? He's paying lip service to tshuva, but v'libam richak mimeni, but his heart is distant. We said heart is Binah. The lips, the mouth is malchus, and you still have a bechina of malchus, of this worldliness that's disconnected really from the heart and soul of things. It's still, in and of itself, an aspect of the person's kavod, instead of it being a materialist, financial, just this worldly kavod. It is a spiritual kavod that the person thinks that now they're a big tzaddik, and the person has ulterior motives, and that requires a person to do tshuva on that tshuva. And the second kind of tshuva is a much holier one, where a person emerges from the hasag of k'fayid olam hazeh, where the Rebbe said that a person has a certain hasaga of godliness while they're doing tshuva on the first madrega. Then after they do tshuva, they break into a brand new hasaga, a brand new perception of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in relation to which their original hasaga was a bechina of gashmis, was a bechina of akshama. And that requires them to do a new tshuva, because now they have a brand new concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how deeply HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, and how much He's merciful, and how much He built tshuva into the process of the world, so that never can a person say that they ever took a step outside of godliness, from the standpoint of retrospectively looking back and recognizing that with tshuva, zdoinus nepchu kischuyas, and it was actually all part of a seder, even though it looked like it was like a seder, it was a like a seder from the standpoint of my own kfayim malachim, because it looked like it was below my dignity, so to speak, to have fallen to that place. But it was actually part and parcel of a Seder Elyon. And that's the Bechina of Kfayda Olam Haba. And with that, the Rebbe explained this incredible Gemara called a Zeveach Es Yitzray, a person who shechs the Yitzhahara, they do tshuva, misvada alav, and then they do tshuva al tshuva, sorry, they're misvada on the Zeveach Es Yitzray. So then Ki'ilu Kibtu LaKadosh Baruch Hu B'shnei Alamayis, then they honor the Kadosh Baruch Hu in two realms, Kfayda Olam Hazeh and Kfayda Olam Haba. And we said that there are essentially 4 levels, and that was very important. The first level being Hastaras Pnei Ekya, or Hachzaras Pnei Ekya, when a person is still in the Bechina of Dam, or a person, right, is before they do anything, a person who has the potential for tshuva, which is Anazam al-Mahevi, itself in potential, so they haven't yet activated that aspect of willingness to do tshuva, and that's below the structure, right? That's not even on the structure. If it's possible to shut the door just in case. That's below the structure. Then we have, and shkoyach to whoever fixed the door, my goodness. Yeah. It's huge. Thank you. I don't know how they did it, but thank you very much. So that's number 1. And then we have the 3 madregas of the actual structure of tshuva. The first is anazam l'mahavi. That's when a person is ready to become, nothing happened yet, right? But that's the bechina of wanting, of longing. Then we have the bechina, the next level of where a person is yishma, is yishma bezyaynai, or in the words of the Rebbe, shaymim charpasam ve'ena meshivim, is kfayda olam hazeh, right? That's the next level. And then finally, a person reaches kfayda olam haba, that's tshuva al tshuvasai, which of course triggers a brand new cycle, because at that point, a person realizes that klape a higher tshuva, he's mamish, not only is he in kfayda olam hazeh, but he's like in anazam heavy mode again. Right now, I'm ready to become. Then he does tshuva, and then he reaches the highest tshuva, and then he goes back again, and so on and so forth, and that process repeats itself. We jump in at Ois Dalid, and the Rebbe says like this: so Kishuraitza Adam, one of the most really fundamental paragraphs in all of Kisvei Breslov, perhaps, and it really cuts to the core of Rebbe Nachman's whole message. And the Rebbe says like this: when a person wants to walk on the paths of tshuva, and that word is very specific, b'darchei hatshuva, as we're going to see, there are multiple paths of tshuva, really 2, dual paths of tshuva. Tzarich liya is baki b'halacha. A person needs to be an expert in halacha. On a simple level, it means kipshutai, right? If a person doesn't know, then a person is not going to be able to do. And very basically, a person needs to try to learn halacha. In Breslov, halacha is the most important thing in the world. Right? A person has to learn Shulchan Aruch every single day. Rebbe Nachman made a huge deal about this. That a person should have a rolling seder from the beginning of Shulchan Aruch to the end of Shulchan Aruch. It's reported in the name of the Chavetz Chaim that one of his Talmidim wanted to become a chassid. He felt drawn to chassidus, and the Chavetz Chaim reportedly told him to become a Breslover chassid because they're very makbid on halacha. Right? In Breslov, halacha was the most important thing. People gloss over this. They don't realize. They think Breslov is all about espodudas and spirituality. Of course it is, but you cannot have spirituality without halacha. Right? Halacha is the guf to which all the spiritual energy is the soul, and you have to bring the soul down into a guf. You cannot have one without the other. Very important. Right? And so the Rebbe says very basically, tzarich li has baki b'halacha. Person has to have a hasaga, because sometimes a person has to have a yearning to become a baki b'halacha. But in this context, it means something separate as well. Maybe primarily, it means something separate, because halacha could mean Jewish law, right? Or at least colloquially, that's how it's translated. But the shirish of the word halacha, of course, is lech, right? Lech lecha, to walk, to travel. Says the Rebbe, a person has to be an expert in halacha. It's really halicha. A person has to be an expert in knowing how to walk. Knowing how to walk. What does this mean? Says the Rebbe, a person has to have two kinds of expertise. And every word is miduyak, as we're going to see in this Torah, even though in all the lessons, every word is very, very highly specific and used particularly. In this Torah, Rebbe Nachman pulls away the curtain, and you see how every single word that he uses kol kulei kisvei arizal in the most remarkable way. So every word is important here. So make note of it. A person has to have two bekiyas, two kinds of expertise. Number one, a person has to be a baki biratzai. Hainu baki biratzai. A person has to be an expert in what's called running. Baki biratzai means an expert in running. This terminology, ratzai, comes from the Navi Yecheskel, that in his vision of the chariot of the Merkava, he sees the malachim that are ratzai v'shoiv kemare habazak, that are running and returning like a flash of lightning that comes down and then emerges like a flash, down and up. Ratzai means running, and shoiv means going back to where it came from. So says the Rebbe, you have to have two bikiyas, you have to have two expertise in life. Number one, a person has to be a baki biratzai. He has to be an expert in knowing how to run, which we're going to see what that means in a minute, spiritually, obviously, not physically, although that also helps. Good. Chuvas haguf. A person needs to be an expert jogger, maybe. But that's not what it means over here. A person needs to be an expert in spiritually running and rising, as we're going to see. And also, and here's the Ikar Chiddush of the Rebbe, and really the Ikar Chiddush of Rebbe Nachman, is baki b'shayv. A person has to be an expert in knowing how to return. What does this mean? As the Zohar Kadosh says on Ayakel, Zaka'aman, fortunate is the person, da'ayil v'nafik, who knows how to go in, v'nafik, and knows how to go out. And this is reminiscent of the Gemara in Chagiga. There's reminiscent to the Gemara in Chagiga that tells us about the Arba Shenichnesu Lepardes, and about Rabbi Akiva it says, Nichnes be shalom, v'yatsa b'shalom. There's an aspect of going in peacefully and coming out peacefully. Says Rebbe Nachman, that's an Indian of baki biratzai, baki b'shayv. You have to at least know this terminology. If you don't know anything else from Breslov, this terminology is crucial. Baki biratzai, baki b'shayv. The whole Breslov is in these two words. To be an expert in running and an expert in returning. An expert in going in and an expert in going out. So just on a simple level, even though Rebbe Nachman is going to elaborate on this very, very much and at great length later on in the lesson, very basically, when we think about spiritually going in or going out or going up or going down or rising or falling or ratzah v'shayv, we think about the general concept of aliyah and yerida. When a person is succeeding in Avodas Hashem and a person is moving up and going higher in connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's generally what we consider an aliyah, a spiritual ascent. And then there are other times in life where a person is yored, when a person is sinking down. Person is sinking down. And the Rebbe says that a person has to be an expert in doing both, which is an absolute paradigm shift as it relates to Yiddishkeit. Because generally speaking, the way that most of us are mechunach, the way that we're educated, is that a person really needs to be in ratzai all the time, meaning all the time needs to be in a state of aliyah. And if they should ever happen to fall below and have an experience of shayv, of yerida, so then quickly they need to find some way to get back up there. Right? Like that's their avodah in that moment is essentially the same avodah as they generally have when they are in a high moment. And the whole point is just to quickly and as speedily as they can to schlep themselves back up to the top quadrant. Anything outside of which or below which is not considered avodas Hashem. Right? So basically the whole Yiddishkeit is relegated to the upper half of a circle, if you picture it that way, right? It's basically like a rainbow shape of the upper half of the circle, and if you slip below that, now you're no longer serving God, you're no longer connected to Hashem, you have to quickly find a way to pull yourself back up. Some people can do that multiple times a day, some people can do that multiple times a week, some people can do that multiple times much more infrequently, maybe once a month, and then they have a yerida and they say, okay, I'll start next week, and then, because the week is already ruined, or something like this, right? And they stay where they are. And then, when I'm able to pull myself back up, and then I'll be able to serve Hashem again. Rebbe Nachman takes a fundamentally different approach, and this was one of the things in Breslov that totally changed my life, because it's a complete paradigm shift in the way that we generally view what serving God even is in the first place. And the Rebbe says, well, actually, a Jew needs two expertise. A person needs to be an expert in ratzai, in running, in Aliyah, but a person also needs to be an expert in the Bechina of Shoiv. Baki b'ratzai, baki b'shayv. So what does these things mean? It's a very cryptic paragraph. Again, Rebbe Nachman is going to go much more at length later on in the lesson. But the Rebbe gives us a little bit of a greater insight by using an incredible, one of my favorite psukim in Tehillim, one of the most, I think, explicitly spiritual, even though the whole Tehillim is spiritual, but this is mamish, direct. And David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Im esak shamayim sham'ata. If I rise to the heavens, sham'ata, you are there. Says the Rebbe B'chinas Oil. This is the aspect of going in. Im esak shamayim. Person goes up to heaven, God is there. But here David HaMelech says the chiddush B'chinas baki b'ratzai. That's the aspect of running. That's the aspect of being an expert in knowing how to serve Hashem in a time of aliyah when things are going well. At the end of the pasuk says va'atzia sha'al hinaka. But when I sink down into the depths of hell, hinaka, there you are. And that's a different concept. That's not when I sink down to the depths of hell, I need to scurry back up because in shamayim shamata. Va'atzia sha'al hinaka. There's an avoida of those times in life when a person sinks into the lower quadrant of that circle, where a person slips below the higher madrigas of connection to Hashem. There's an avoida in that place. And Rebbe Nachman is going to explain it, just tell you a little bit now, but Rebbe Nachman is going to explain that im esak shamayim sham'ata, that when a person rises to shamayim, there's an avoida there, because what's the potential, chas v'shalom, the potential blemish that could result in spiritual success? Complacency. Right? Or a person who feels gaiva, right, in a certain interesting way, k'vayid malachim, that could dafka be produced by this, that a person is succeeding and rising into k'vayid elikim, where a person stops to look at themselves for a second, and all of a sudden they say, wow, I really am a tzaddik, I mamish reached the madriga. Whoa, that's k'vayid malachim. And that could happen specifically because of a person's aliyah in Yiddishkeit. And so that's why the pasuk in Tehillim is telling you, Im esak shamayim sham'ata. Sham means not here. Sham means there. Sham means more distant. It means that your avodah is to keep on going, not to stop, not to become complacent. And then the flip side is va'atzia sha'al, that if a person sinks down into dark places, what's the ikar avodah there? Well, the question is, what's the potential danger? And the potential danger, of course, is giving up. The potential danger is a person who's thinking that in this place, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I can't connect him. How am I going to get back up there if there's no rope? You know, if there's no Yaakov Kehal Yedidim, like the Baal Tanya, you know, the whole Am Yisrael is connected by like a rope to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if I feel that rope has been severed, and if I feel that, you know, like a Malik comes to separate between Yud K, right, and Vav K, and Ein Hashem Shalem, there's no godliness in the lower realm. That's the whole Indian of Amalek. Ein Akise Shalem, Ein Hashem Shalem, right? So Amalek is happy for there to be a God up there, right? Yud Hey he has no problem with, right? But Vav and Hey, so all of a sudden, how am I going to climb back up? And Amalek is Asher Karcha B'derech, coming up to Purim now, and Amalek is making a Jew feel completely hopeless. Yeshna Am Echad Mufuzim Afire, Nisparda Chavila, the whole rope as disconnected and frayed, and there's nothing left. So then in that place, the Baki B'Shayv means that a person needs to go with the eitzes and the chizik of the Rebbe to recognize Malay Chala Aretz Kavayda, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mamish in this place. And that's why it says, Va'atzia sha'al hineka. Not that you're somewhere else. Hineka. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mamish here. In Torah Zayin and Tinyana, and this shows up many places in Likutei Moharan in various forms. This is really a fundamental structure that we're going to see again and again and again in Likutei Moharan. Rebbe Nachman speaks about the hasagas, the perceptions of what he calls Ben and Talmud. They're getting into the whole sugya of that now. It's Torah Zayin and Tinyana, the 7th lesson in the 2nd volume. And the hasaga of the Ben, who's a person who's very close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, needs to be Aye Mekayim Kavaydai. That's such a person who thinks that they're a Ben, Mechapes Beginzai Damalka, that's such a person who's so close to the king, needs to know Aye Mekayim Kavaydai. A person hasn't accessed anything yet. Tachlis Hayadil, like we were learning a little bit yesterday, Ashaloi Neda, right, is to realize that a person does not know, and that's Aye. The flip side of a person who's sinking down into the depths, the Bechin of Talmud, a person who's a little bit less connected, more removed, the aspect of Eved, needs to know that Adarabba, Miloi, Chol, Haaretz, Kevoida. The whole earth is saturated with the Kodesh Baruch Hu's presence. This is the distinction between Baki Be Ratzai and Baki B'Shoiv. That's the Bechina of Im Esak Shamayim Shamata and Matzia Shal Hinaka Bechinas V'Nafik. Says the Rebbe, that's the aspect of a Nafik, of going out. Bechinas Baki B'Shoiv, the aspect of being an expert in returning. And a person has to have these two expertise, both in Aliyah and in Yerida. Fascinatingly enough, if you take the Rosh Tevis of Ratzai, Shoiv, Oyel, Nafik, a Reish, a Shin, an Ayin, and a Nun, it spells Sharnun. Sharnun. Accessing the 50th gate, the gate of Binah. Binah, he said, is the Kisei HaKavod. Kisei HaKavod is Tshuva, Tshuva Shemegasat, Kisei HaKavod. That aspect of Sharnun, that's mamish what Tshuva is all about. A person has to have these two expertise, Baki B'Ratzai, Baki B'Shoiv, Baki B'Oyel, Baki B'Nafik. Says the Rebbe was there because the whole lesson is Soid Kavanas Elul. The whole lesson is built on the Arizal's Kabbalistic intentions for the month of Elul. He says this is the deeper meaning of the pasuk in SHIURIM, which is all about Elul, of course. The Rosh Tevis, Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. What's the distinction between these two things? What does Shlomo HaMelech mean to, or intend to communicate? Ani L'Doidi, I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me V'Doidi Li. Just, it's the same thing. If I am to my beloved, so then, like, if you're together, you're together. What's the I am to my beloved? My beloved is to me. Says the Rebbe, it's referring to these two halves of spiritual trajectory. These two different kinds of avodas Hashem, and a person needs to be able to know where they're at along the journey and which hasaga they need to activate to be able to know that they are being omed in nisayon. Because let's make this very clear: the first kind of nisayon is before a person does the avera, right? And the nisayon is not to do the avera, and that's the bechina baki b'ratzai when a person is in a high place. Post avera, it's not just, okay, now I was over, and now like that case is closed, and it's like that's put away, and now, you know, we'll deal with the next nisayon when we get there. There's a brand new nisayon that's created in that moment, and sometimes, according to the Chazim Lublin, Rebbe Cheskel Mikuz, other tzaddikim, sometimes the second nisayon, which is the nisayon to give up and to stop trying to connect, even in whatever way that person can connect in that spiritually constricted mindset of Moichlin Dekatnas, is actually the fundamental intention of the Yetzer Hara in the first place. Like what I sometimes say, this is the difference between getting caught in the spider web and then getting eaten by the spider. Right? Why does the spider make the spider web? Because it wants to eat the fly. It's not interested. It's not, they're not, making a fly collection and just, seeing how many flies they could catch. They want to eat the fly. So you say, sinning and not being Oymid bin Isayan is getting caught in the web. Sometimes that's not the Yetzer Hara's ikar intention. Giving up is getting eaten by the spider. The hechatimsa, right, meaning the way that the spider, or the Yetzer Hara in this case, will get a person to give up is by catching him in the web. But that's not the point. Right, that's the aspect of getting stuck, and that's all of a sudden a person is in shoiv. Now there's an isayon. How are you going to carry on in this space? Will a person do tshuva, but the tshuva is not on the real tshuva level because really there's a part of them that doesn't really believe in tshuva, and so they go through the motions, b'svas of kibduni, but v'libam richak mimeni, because like what can you do? You can't mamish, stay an Orthodox Jew and completely disconnected. So, but there's a part of the person who feels that they died. Or is a person going to be oimbin in that nisayon and be a baki b'shayv? Says the Rebbe, Ani l'daidi v'daidi li. Ani l'daidi, I am to my beloved. Where a Jew says, I am rising to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, zebechinas oil. That's the aspect of oil, going in, or ratzai, rising, running. But a person also has to know v'daidi li, that sometimes when a person falls and falters and fails and sinks below their standards and struggles with certain aspects of Yiddishkeit, which is fundamentally, mamish fundamentally common, right? Ein sadik b'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yechta. There is no such thing. And obviously there were two schools of thought. How do we deal with that? Should we just gloss over it and pretend like sin never happens and never address it in the hope that we don't normalize it, in the hope that we don't cause people to think that now it's okay, because we're addressing it, because of that? Or do we recognize that it's so absolutely common, and not only is it so common as a b'di'evet, but actually there's a theological value of that experience of Yerida where we absolutely need to talk about it, because if we don't, then there's a whole aspect of Torah that simply is being misaddressed or non-addressed, And the risk of that is much greater, because then you have a whole nation of people who think that there's something fundamentally wrong with them, who think that they're Rishayim, who think that they cannot serve Hashem in a lichatchila way, and that's the cause of a tremendous amount of disconnect emotionally, and mental health issues, and self-worth identity problems, and so on and so forth. And Rebbe Nachman squarely is within the Baal Shem Tov's tradition of the very, very clear approach, and we understand that there are other approaches, but this is Rebbe Nachman's approach. You have to address this. You have to address this, and not only because Nebuchadnezzar is a b'diavad thing that happens, and we should give people chizik, but because according to the Rebbe, this experience of Yerida is a fundamental part of the human experience, and is a lichatchila vis-a-vis the special avodas Hashem that's created specifically when a person is in an experience of shayv. That there's a bekiyas of shayv. You have to know how to be a baki. You have to be a doctor of shayv. You have to be a professor of shayv. You have to be a person who knows what to do in life and how to handle, because that is part and parcel of life. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't create angels. He has angels. Billions and trillions and whatever of angels. Hashem created humans, and part of the human experience is both aliyah and yerida. If we're being vulnerable and honest, there's not one person in the room who doesn't know that this is fundamentally true. How much of our time do we spend in Moich and Dekatnus, despite all of our SHIURIM that we give some of us, not mentioning any names, and despite how much we talk about Emunah, let's be real, for a second. You have to have a Bekiyas in Shayv. Be a Baki in Shayv, a Baki in Shas and Paiskim, and a Baki in Shayv. It's just as important, because even the people who are Baki in Shas and Paiskim, despite however it looks on the surface, they know what Shayv is also, because they're human beings. And a person has to know how to be an expert in this Torah of Shayv. And he says, V'zeh Said Kavanas Elul, and this is the deeper meaning of the Kabbalistic intentions of the month of Elul, which the R Yaakov revealed, which we're going to get into in the next to about a daf from now. V'zeh Iker Kavaydai. And this is the primary manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's glory, because the primary manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's glory is the manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is only present in the top quadrant of the earth, so then his expression is limited. But when a person is able to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence even in the dark, that despite a person's best efforts and holding themselves up to high standards and striving and trying and working on things, a person inevitably slips, and a person has a difficult day, and a person falls below their standard, and a person in that place is able to be a Baki B'Shayv, to recognize Malay Chala Aretz Kavayda, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's with me here now, then you just manifested HaKadosh Baruch Hu's glory in an incredible way. Like the Rebbe is going to tell us in Torah Yud, based on last week's parasha, Karasa Yisroi, based on Isaiah, that when Yisroi approached and he came close to the Jewish nation, Kohen Midian, chief idol worshiper in the whole entire world, Kedenis Yakar is Allah Shma Ilah, the Zohar says. God's name was Isyakar. It was made extra precious in a way that nobody ever glorified HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name like Yisroi. Why? Because he demonstrated that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is so vast and bright that it was able to reach even there, even to that place. And Ze'ikr Kvaydai, this is primary to the experience of tshuva. V'zeu, and that's why the pasuk says in Yeshayahu, V'chibadetai, you have honored HaKadosh Baruch Hu me'asois drachecha, by performing dirachecha, your paths. Says the Rebbe, drachecha lashon rabim. It doesn't just refer to one path, but it refers to multiple paths, or again, dual paths. These two paths of tshuva, hainu, ayil v'nafik, which is going in and coming out. Rabbi Akiva knows how to be nichnas b'shalom, as well as yatsa b'shalom. Says the Rebbe, and a person has these two expertise, and the whole Kisvei Breslov, really, the whole Indian of the Rebbe, is to teach you both Ratzai and to teach you Shaiv. Azayu hoilich b'darchei tshuva. Then a person is always walking on the path of tshuva, because there's never one moment in your life that isn't part and parcel of the process of getting close to God. Because all of a sudden, tshuva doesn't necessarily always look like Yom Kippur and a kittel and not eating and drinking, and saying al chet the whole day. That's ratzai. But sometimes a person's not on that madrega. Tshuva can sometimes also mean that a person doesn't stop believing in their fundamental goodness, and that's part of tshuva. That's tshuva on a lesser level, as we're going to learn in a minute, because it correlates obviously, right, to k'vod olam hazeh, right, which is the lower aspect that we've been learning about, and that structure that we've created of 3 points, the lower point, the middle point, and the higher point, like we've been learning. And so Baki B'Shoiv is when a person sinks below, and the tshuva is being done on a lower level, and it's with pnius, and it's with gaiva, and it's still a person's experience of the achsaris pnei eke, the bechina of dam, because a person's in a state of yurida. But fundamentally, a person is still on the paths of tshuva, and a person doesn't reject their tshuva because they look in the mirror and say, let's be honest, I don't really feel this. You got to feel it, because you feel it on some level. A person's not there, but a Kadosh Baruch Hu is present, and so it's real. Because of its connection to Hashem from where you're at, then it's real, because you can always connect to Hashem from where you're at. That's the Bechina of Baki B'Shayv. So a person always walks on the paths of tshuva, b'zayich l'chved Hashem. And the person will eventually get to the penultimate, to that ultimate level of true havaya, of true existing, or really accessing ekya, right? Really accessing that place of not just I want to be, but being mamash, fundamentally satisfying that yearning to become. And what word shows up in that context? Of course, because it's all about the kavod of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Such a person is Zayveach Taida. He honors a Kadosh Baruch Hu b'shnei olamai. So this context is Baki B'Ratzai and Baki B'Shayv, and the pasuk says Zayveach Taida yichab danani. Also the bechina of kavod. Hainu shezaychel keser. Such a person reaches the crown, reaches keser, kiles kavod b'lei chaf, because he cannot get to kavod, like we said, without chaf, va'az, and then is manifest the expression of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's mercy that's encapsulated in these words, which we're going to see the Kabbalistic secret of later on in the lesson. Yemin Hashem pshuta lekabel tshuva. Kadosh Baruch Hu's hand is outstretched to receive his tshuva, and again, very enigmatically, v'zeh side kavanas elul. And this is the real deep understanding of the Arizal's Kabbalah and his mystical intentions for Elul, which, as we'll see, if you just learn them as a Kabbalist, are very dry and are very technical. And it's important as a meditation for a person to have certain names of Hashem. But the whole thing of Hasidus is to take the car of Kabbalah, as it were, and it's like a beautiful Ferrari, and like it's gleaming and it's shining, and the wheels and everything is perfect and good quality. But you don't have a key to turn it on, it's not going to get you from point A to point B. If you don't know how to bring it down into the emotional sphere of everyday living to make it practical, right? And to take these shemas and to show what they actually mean, al derech avoida. That was the Baal Shem Tov's Chiddush, and that's why the Baal Shem was a brand new gilui of the Arizal. And it could be said that Rebbe Nachman, even within the gilui of the Baal Shem, was an even deeper expression of how to take these concepts of the Ari, like Rav Nassan said in Akdama, the whole Kisvei Arizal is in the sefer, but the whole sefer is al derech avoida, is to bring it down to teach us how to live in a very practical, functional way, if not mamish, practical from the standpoint of what to do and where to do and so on, even though there's some of that as well, but practical from the standpoint of a consciousness shift that enables us to take the kavanas of the Ari and to live them and embody them and to filter the world through our understanding that's colored by the unbelievable stained glass windows, as it were, of the Arizal's teaching. Here we come to a very complicated paragraph, but the central paragraph in the entire lesson, which is Eis Hey. Says the Rebbe, and this requires you to hold on tight. It's not easy at 6:30 in the morning. So, Ashreichem, everybody who's going to be listening to this, nice and awake later on. But it's for us, we have to be holding on tight. This is not simple. Says the Rebbe, you have to hold on tight for this one. Through demima and shtika, which is the first stage of the tshuva process, when a person is yishma b'zyoynai and yidan v'yishtaik, and a person doesn't try to defend themselves, because on that level a person is minimizing their own glory, and sometimes a whole process of falling down into yerida is for the purpose of a person to recognize I'm not as great as I thought I was, which is itself a bizayon, right? Should we say in davening? All right, the end of the brachas in the morning, birchas hashachar, lo lidei nisayon, v'lo lidei Vizayon. Rebbe Nachman says in Chaim Iran, other an Isayon, other a Bizayon. Right? It's either one of two things. Either you're getting an Isayon and you're withstanding it, or you're not withstanding it, in which case you get another gift. And that gift, so to speak, is called Bizayon. Right? And that's the first aspect of the three-prong, or the three-stage tshuva process, Because on that level, a person is just hearing themselves being embarrassed because a person sunk down into that low place, and a person responds with silence. Says the Rebbe, that silence produces the nekuda of a chirik, which is one particular point underneath a letter, a Hebrew vowel which makes the sound E, the chirik. How does the Rebbe know this? It was mar kesher to a lower level to this aspect of the chirik. Kamuva batikunim, because it's a tikkunei zayar. And the tikkunei zayar says, we might go over time for this one, we'll see if we can finish this paragraph. V'tachas raglav kemasa livnas hasapir, that underneath HaKadosh Baruch Hu's feet, which we saw Kiviyachol, right, manifest at Har Sinai, was Kemasa Livnas HaSapir, was like sapphire brickwork. Livnas is a lavena, right, is a brick, and Sapir is this sapphire, this shining gem. And says the R Yaakov, says Reb Shimon, da chirik. What they saw underneath the legs is called a chirik. The Livnas HaSapir is the Nekuda of chirik. That's what the Zohar says. Doesn't elaborate, doesn't explain. But that is the Nekuda of Chirik, and Zebechinas va'aretz hadoim ragloi. The earth is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's footstool. Because what's underneath feet? Underneath feet is a footstool. What's the word for footstool? Is hadoim ragloi. What's hadoim? Doim is silence. Okay. So hadoim ragloi is the bechina of a person hearing themselves being embarrassed and remaining silent, because hadoim ragloi, from dam to doim. And in another pasuk we have a reference to the livnas hasapir, which is in the place of tachas raglav, which is hadoim ragloi. And about that livnas hasapir, the Zohar Kadosh says this is a chirik. Says the Rebbe, okay, put these two sources together. That means that when a person is responding to their sense of inner shame, other nisayon, other abizayon, a person either falls into that place, right, and a person falls into that place of a bizayon, and a person responds with daim, says the Rebbe, all of a sudden is activated va'aretz hadoim ragloi, and v'tachas raglav k'masat livnas hasapir, which is da chirik, which the Zohar says is a chirik. And here the Rebbe starts to really explain it. V'zebechinas nekuda hatachtoina shel tmunas aleph. The entire Torah Vav is just a pirish on the letter Aleph. The whole thing is a pirish on the letter Aleph. There are a number of other Torahs in Likutei Moharan that also go on the Aleph, predominantly Torah Samach Vav, which we're going to get to, and of course they all interlock and they all interconnect. And the mouth is not able to express the brilliance and the depth of the sefer. It's beyond. It really is beyond. There's nothing like it in the world. But this, says the Rebbe, is the nekuda tachtoina of the letter Aleph, because the letter Aleph has three components. It has a yud lemata, it has a vav be'emtza, and it has a yud lemala. Sounds familiar? 3 stages that we've been speaking about all along, and now the Rebbe is going to fit it all in to the letter Aleph, right? So the first level, we said, is when a person hears themselves being embarrassed and they remain silent. That's the bechina of ekya, which is ana zaman l'mehevi, I am ready to become. So that's the nekuda tachtoina. How did the Rebbe get this concept of a nekuda tachtoina? Because he got it from va'aretz hadoim ragloi, right? Which is a footstool, which is on the bottom, which is livnas hasapir dachirik, but hadoim ragloi is the aspect of silence. Unekuda al-yoina, now the Rebbe jumps to the top point in the Aleph. Sha'al ha'alef zebechinas keser. This is the aspect of keser, right? Which is tshuva, which is a person really getting to that place of keser, keser v'akavod l'chayir lamin, right? Where a person accesses k'foid aliki through the aspect of keser, tshuva. And how does the Rebbe know that? Bechinas, because the pasuk in Yechezkel says umimal l'rakia, and above the heavens asher al roisham, which was above their heads, which is a fundamentally opposite place to below the feet, right? So below the feet is the first level, that's the nekuda tachtoina, and that's hadoim raglis demimo shtika. And above the heads, right, which is going to be the nekuda aliyona, was even sapir, also the shining sapphire stone, demuskise, which was in the form of a chair. Kisei means chair, but it could also mean milashin kisui, to conceal or to cover. Says the Rebbe, that's a reference to the Nekuda Elyoina, to the top point in the letter Aleph, to the upper Yud, which is hidden beyond the Vav. It's beyond the Vav. Because you know what the Vav is called? The Tikkun Zera calls the Vav inside the Aleph, the Miskaria, Rakia. The Vav is called the heavens. So Umimal L'Rakia is a Dmus Kamara Kisei. What's a Kisei? Kisei is something that's hidden, and it's a hidden point that's beyond the horizon, that's beyond the Rakia, because it's so distant, it's so far away, right? In Esak Shamayim, right? A person reaches that place, Shamata. That aspect of true is always, I'm not here yet, but on a Zaman Lamahavi. I'm always on a trajectory trying to reach that lofty level, and it's hidden beyond the Rakia. What's the Rakia? Rakia is the Vav. And that's the structure that really holds the whole thing together. Once you can identify the middle of the Aleph as a Vav, so then you can look at what's under the Vav, under the Shemayim, or Mitachas, is a Bechina of the Nekuda Tachtoina, and that's what Arts Hadoim Ragla, which is Dmi Moshtika, and that which is above the Vav, which is a Mimal Rakia, is the Kisei. Kisei, says the Rebbe, is Keser, which is hidden. V'Nekuda, that high point, the high Nekuda Ukise de Miskasia, is this hidden chair. Kamashikasov, like it says about Keser Bamufla Mimcha Al Tidresh, that which is beyond you, don't darshan in that place. Of a mechusa v'mcha, that which is hidden from you, al tachgar, don't investigate. That place is concealed, that place is hidden, that place we don't know how to say anything about, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's motivation for creation. We don't know, right? And so in that place we have to remain silent. That's the aspect of Keser. Keser, which correlates to the will of Hashem in creating the world, which we know nothing about. Chochmah me'ayin timatzeh. Chochmah emerges from Keser, and in that context, Keser is called ayin. It's hidden. We don't know anything about it. It's kisei de miskasia. It's hidden. V'zeh b'chinas kvoid elikim, which is haster davar. We said in the very beginning, Kvoid Elikim, when a person reaches Kvoid Elikim, they get out of Kvoid Malachim and they rise above to Kvoid Elikim. Haster Davar, it's the way of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to conceal matters. That's the glory of Elikim is Haster. Says the Rebbe, whoa, Haster, what's the connection in this context between Haster, right, something that's concealed? Says the Rebbe, beautiful, because it's the Nekuda Elyoina, and the Nekuda Elyoina is Kisei, and the Nekuda Elyoina Kisei is Keser, and that's V'mechusa Mimcha Al Tachgar, which is the Bechina of Kvoid Elikim Haster Davar, that in that context is the contrast to Kvoid Malachim Chakar Davar. Haster Davar means Al Tachgar, right? Because Bechusa Mimcha, Mechusa is the Kisei. It's Keser that's hidden Bechinas Keser. Va'avav Shaba Aleph, and the Vav in the middle, Hu Rakia, which is the Bechina of Rakia, is Shamayim, is another way of saying Shamayim. What's Shamayim? Shamayim we know is a mix. Rashi tells us right in the beginning, Eish Umayim. It's a mix of fire and water. It has both. Says the Rebbe, this is the aspect of the busha that a person feels. Because on the first level, in the Nekuda Tachtoina, a person's doim, right? A person's being Mekayim doim Hashem, but it doesn't mean that they really onboarded the busha. It's a madrega that they're not answering, but it doesn't mean that they really are listening. They're just not answering. And that's what the Rebbe says. If you're Medayik in the bottom of the very first paragraph, the Rebbe says, Shiyam menashoymim cherpasam ve'ina meshivim. They're listening to themselves being embarrassed and they're not responding. That's the Bechina of Daim, which is a Chirik, right? Which is the Bechina of V'tachlas Ragla, V'tachas Ragla, Kumasei Livnas Sapir, which is the Nekuda Tachtoina, the lower Yud of the Aleph. And that's one Madrega. But then there's a whole other thing, which is V'lo Yedaktik Al Bizi and Kvoidai. Then a person is really getting embarrassed, and they're not being medactic on their own embarrassment. That's okay. They're allowing that to take place, and they're allowing themselves to feel that feeling. Says the Rebbe, that means that you rose beyond the Nekuda Tachtoin of the Aleph, which is that place of Hadoim Ragloi of Dmima and Shtika, and a person went to the Vav. The Vav is Rakia, Rakia is Shamayim, Shamayim is Eshamayim. Says the Rebbe, that's a Bechina of Busha, Shenishtana Panav Lekama Gvanim, because a person's face changes colors, and that's the Bechina of Eish and Mayim. It goes from red to white, right? A person goes through Bechina of Chasadim and Gevuras, and a person goes through that experience, and that's the Vav, that's the Rakia. But Bechina is Rakia, Kalalias HaGvanim. This is the aspect of the Rakia, which is the Vav, which is Shamayim, which is Eshamayim, which is a mixture of different colors. And says the Rebbe, you know something? When a person gets through these levels and goes from Daim, which is the Bechina of Shoiv, which is the Bechina of Kfoid al-Mazeh, which is the Bechina of Kfoid Malachim, and a person through the process of Busha, Ekya, Tshuva, On a zaman l'mehevi, a person rises to the Nekuda Elyoina, which is Keser, which is Kiseh, which is Kvayd Elikim, Haster Davar, Mechusam Mchal Tidrash, which is Kvayd Elikim, which is Kvayd Olam Abba, which is Ratzai. Right? Understand? So we just put all of what we learned into this three level construct. And it would be very, very useful to write this out as a diagram. I had it in here, but I took the papers out. I was traveling, I took them out, and they're at home. But it's very useful to chart this whole thing out. And in the book, of course, there's going to be lots of diagrams for all of this. It's absolutely brilliant. But it's all one thing. I can't communicate how it's beyond brilliance. It's sometimes hard to. You have to just feel it, be margish it, but it's all one thing. The Rebbe binds the whole lesson together. Says the Rebbe, when a person gets to this level, v'nasa al yedei ze adam l'shavas al hakiseh. This is what Yecheskel means when he saw the vision of a human being, of a tselem elokim sitting on the kiseh. You become an adam. Because Ekia means that on a zaman l'mehevi, I don't have any havaya, I don't exist in the world. But when a person reaches that madrega, havaya, you exist. Now you're an Adam. And paradoxically, in order to become an Adam, you have to get your own sense of human greatness and k'fayda malachim out of the way. And when you do that, then you start to reflect the tzelem elikim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now you're the royal crier. And now you're a person who's living for k'fayda elikim. Now you're a person who's mamish. You've gotten yourself out of the way, and now HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is shining through you. Because you know why? That same piece from Tikkun Zayar tells us, Ki les Adam b'lei Aleph. Just like you cannot have kavod or keser without a chaf, you can't have Adam without an Aleph. Says the Rebbe, it's referring to this Aleph, to these three holy levels, which encompass the entirety of a human spiritual journey. Baki b'ratzai, Baki b'shayiv, K'fayda elikim, and K'fayda malachim, K'fayda elam haba, K'fayda elam hazeh. All these different aspects, the Nekuda Elyoina, the Nekuda Tachtoina, Ekia Havaya, all of the Bechinas that a person goes through in their whole life. Can you imagine if we gave this over in high school? Can you imagine that? If you spent, mamish, like you spend a whole year just on Torah Vav, you create a tremendous curriculum. This is everything every high school kid needs. They just need it in a way that they could understand it. But this is what they all need. This is why, I'm telling you, this is why they go through what they go through, because no one ever told them that there's Bechina Baki B'Shayv. Nobody ever told them that there's a way of serving God through your humanity. And there's a big crisis. Everybody's, looking at things they shouldn't be looking at. I have to tell you, it's a pasuk, and we say it every 3 times a day in Kriya Shema, right? You know what zoinim acharem means? It's in the DNA of a human being, who's a male, particularly, to look at these things. That's not like a crisis. That's normal human behavior. From beginning of time to the end of time. God coded it this way. Yes, there's an ideal to not look at that, right? But teenagers are teenagers. This is not me saying this. So there's the Revolver's approach and really the Stipler's approach. It's going to happen. And the question is, do we give a theology around that that's sensitive enough not to normalize it so that people will go and think that Shalom Alai Nafshi, but a person is constantly striving, but they don't feel like the biggest Rishayim in the world, and they don't check out because someone told them Baki B'Shayv. It's all in this paragraph. I'm telling you, all the therapists and all the things, it's here. It has to do with our theology. It's not going to be healed in therapy if hashkafically we're still giving over a toxic hashkafa that excludes them from serving God, and then all of a sudden you go to therapy and figure out some way to fix yourself. That's crazy. You are fixed. This is called the human experience. We're not giving over a healthy hashkafa, and then we expect that everything's supposed to be fine. It's not fine, and it's all symptoms of this. It is all symptoms. It's not an issue. It is a symptom of this. Everything is here. Adam Aleph. Okay, let's just go finish. I'm sorry, quickly. Less Adam alei Aleph, v'zeh ois Adam. Says the Rebbe, once you have the Aleph that is encapsulative of this entire process, you have Aleph, Daim, says the Rebbe. This is how the Aleph is produced, because Aleph, Dam is Adam. Adam, Aleph, Daim. Hainu al yedei Daim Lashem, the process that begins with the Aretz HaDaim Ragla, which is the Chirik Nasa Aleph. Through Aleph, through Doim, you can get to Aleph. V'nasa Adam l'sheves ala kisei. And then you can have the Adam that's sitting on top of the kisei. Because, again, Chazara. Ki avav shebeseicha Aleph hu rakia. The vav in the middle of the Zohar Kadosh told us is the rakia. And that's our starting point. That's our point of reference. Once you have the vav as the rakia, then you can know what's above the rakia, what's below the rakia. Keklalias hagvanim ano abusha canal. That vav is the Indian of busha. That's the bechina of ekia. That's when tshuva is activated. For real. Right? The nakuda tachtoina is being silent, because what's aretz is below rakia, right? And so once you know what rakia is, and that's the vav and the aleph, you know what the point under the rakia is, because that's your frame of reference, and that's referenced in the word aretz. Is hadoim raglei is demima zabechinas chirik, and that's the bechina of the letter of the nakuda chirik, like the Zohar says that the livin asasaper below the raglayim, which is mitachas rakia, is a chirik bechinas v'tachas raglav v'anakud al yaina hu kisi de viskasia. The nakud al yaina is the hidden chair. This is bechinas tshuva. This is a true tshuva bechinas k'fayda lekim haster davar. When a person reaches k'fayda lekim zeve'av toidi chabdanani bechinas b'mechusim imcha al tachkar. In that place, you're not tachkar because only k'fayda malachim chakar, which is tachkar. But in the bechina k'fayda lekim, it's all haster davar. Bechinas umi ma'al rakia, which is above the vav, the nakud al yain of the aleph, dumas kisei, there's a kisei, and then venasa adam l'sheves ala kisei. Then a person becomes an adam less aleph, less adam b'lay aleph, aleph doim bechinas kamar adam olav milamala. And it's a beautiful diak. This will finish as bechina of a tachas raglav, right? Because what do we say a person needs to know when they're doing tshuva? You have to be a baki b'ratzai, baki b'shay, but the Rebbe said you have to be a baki in halicha, right? So being a baki b'ratzai, pretty much we know how to, when things are going well in Avodas Hashem, that we don't need so much chinuch in. That's okay, right? But to be a baki b'shay, and it just hit me now as I'm reading this, tachas raglav, meaning there's a way of walking that's tachas. How do you walk when you're tachas? Tachas raglav, right? That's a baki b'halacha, baki b'halicha, as it relates to being a baki b'shayv. This is dense. This is a lot of material. This is a lot of it. So the Rebbe packs it in. Very much kedai, like I said, on all the tires. But if you have some time later in the day, just sit and just refresh. Even for a couple of minutes, you try to work it out, draw out a diagram for yourself, listen to the shir again on 2.5 times speed if you need to, again, or just the bits that you missed. Don't be discouraged. Some of the lessons in Likutei Moharan are more complicated. Some of the lessons are more are simpler, and I think even from the complicated ones, there's still, even if we don't get every single connection and akuda, generally speaking, we can still gain from it a tremendous amount. So please stick with us. What a privilege, what is chos to explore these teachings together. I'm sorry for going a little bit over time. Have a wonderful, phenomenal day. Ashreinu, thank you so much.
האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני